to fight on the landing ground.
Thank you for joining us. You are listening to A Radio, and this is the Morning Moment. Please click on the follow button on Spreaker.com. So the French government have caved. This is from RTE, and I'll play a piece from Fox and Friends after this. The French government is freezing upcoming increases on regulated electricity and gas prices in the wake of protests over rising costs of living, the country's Prime Minister has said. Stricter vehicle emissions set to kick in January 2019 will also be suspended. One of the demands of the Yellow Vest movement, which erupted last month, Prime Minister Edouard Philippe said, "After hearing anger, I suspended for 6 months 3 fiscal measures, including fuel tax increases. No tax merits, putting the unity of the nation in danger." Mr. Philippe said in a televised address, adding that the anger on the streets originates from a profound injustice of not being able to live with dignity from one's work. He added that any future protests should be declared in advance and take place calmly. The so-called Yellow Vest movement, which started on November 17 as a social media organised protest group named for the high visibility jackets all motorists in France must have in their cars, has focused on denouncing a squeeze on household spending brought about by French President Emmanuel Macron's taxes on fuel. Mr. Macron has said the taxes are needed to combat climate change. Ditching them could be a major embarrassment as governments meet in Poland to try and pin down measures to avert the most damaging consequences of global warming, unquote. Now I'm going to put a piece in here for our benefit. We have an out-of-control liberal communist government in Canada who thinks they can do anything, say anything, ignore any law, ignore our constitution, bypass our charter, because they're the liberal communists. They can do anything they want. They're invulnerable. Well, they're not. We, the people, will not tolerate them shoving tax after tax after tax down our throats. We must stand up and fight the Trudeau regime, stand up on Parliament Hill, and say enough is enough. 2019 is coming and we must remove this dictator from office. We must do this for the sake of our country. He has gone well past his political remit. Well past. He thinks he can do whatever he wants, when he wants. He doesn't even listen to his backbenchers. He shouts them down. He ridicules them. He is in fact a dictator. He is in fact a traitor to Canada, and he's a traitor to you. He cares nothing for the Canadian citizen. Nothing. He just wants votes of new, quote, immigrants, unquote. His intention is to flood this country with not tens of thousands, but millions of refugees who can't stand on their own 2 feet, who have to be subsidised by the rest of the Canadian population. He is fundamentally transforming the culture of this country, and we Canadians cannot stand by. We Canadians cannot stand idly by and let this guy continue in office. He does not have the remit to do this. He does not have the remit to force UN regulations down our throat. We do not have to have the fake propaganda of climate change shoved down our throats every single day. Remember that when you go to the voting booth. Climate change is fake. Prove it. Show us the figures. Show us the data. You can't, because it's made up. But you've got to really ask yourself, why is it being made up? All this UN stuff, migration, climate change, all the rest of it is all part of one thing. I keep telling you guys this. It's Agenda 2030. Please go to my website and look it up. Do your own searches. Here's the clip from Fox and Friends.
All right, so let's switch gears and talk about what's happening in France. Maybe you've seen some of this video of a series of protests in France. You say to yourself, what's going on there? Macron is extremely unpopular in the country of France, where he's running right now. And then out of nowhere, this organic protest sprung up about a week and a half ago. It's because they're raising taxes, in particular these gas taxes, for one reason. These are essentially carbon taxes because it's a fossil fuel.
Right.
And the Paris Climate Change is saying that, this is a crisis, Earth.
Well, guess what
and
happened?
we have to solve it.
Guess what happened this morning? They decided to suspend that tax hike. That's about 40%. They're taxing gas. It's just unbelievable how much people are paying there for gasoline. And that's why everyone's rioting. They're saying we can't afford this. And it worked.
Well, it started as the gas tax, and then it morphed into just the quality of life in France. They also anti-government sentiment, as Brian said. Mr. Francois Macron's public relations number right now, his approval rating is at 23%. So they put that on hold for 6 months. Also, apparently, and this goes to show you what's going on over in France, because they spend so much on social programs, they need to jack up the rates. Apparently, they had increases in gas and electricity scheduled to kick in just as winter started. They've decided, you know what? We'll probably kick that in after winter.
So guess what's happening in Poland? It's a follow-up to the Paris Climate Agreement, which we bowed out of. And in Poland, they have 80% of all their fuel comes from coal. Oops, that's a little problem if you read the Paris Agreement. They're trying to come up with penalties for countries that go over these thresholds. Oh, good luck getting a penalty or a fee from China. Good luck getting it from Poland, where you're hosting it. And guess what? All these countries are looking what's happening in France, the home of the Paris Agreement, and going, maybe our societies of lower and middle class who are forced to pay the price for this aren't quite ready for it.
Okay, Bernie Sanders, watch what's happening in France, because that's what he wants to happen here. This is what Rush Limbaugh said.
Isn't Europe utopia? Don't our elites tell us that our future is emulating Europe? From trains to climate change to immigration, the Europeans are doing it right. Well, in this case, the Europeans, the French, are doing exactly what the global climate change political movement wants done. This young little whippersnapper president has put a massive tax on carbon, which has driven the price of gasoline to over $7 a gallon. And you know who's protesting in France? The middle class. They're protesting this carbon tax, which is exactly what the worldwide left wants to happen in the United States.
So going forward, the big question for people of France and all these other nations is, if you're going to spend so much money on these government programs, if you're not going to jack up the taxes, you're going to have to cut back on the social programs. Do you think that's going to happen?
No. You can find more at aradio.wordpress.com, where you can find links to us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Gab, and email. You can now find us on Spotify. Just go to the podcast section and type Canadian Politics with a Twist, and you'll find us. We are continuing to reach out to you, so please pass on the links. Please click on the follow button on Spreaker.com. You can listen to all my morning moments at Spreaker.com under A Radio, that's EHRADIO, A Radio, and please click on the like button. And you can find all my podcasts and morning moments at aradio.wordpress.com and click on the Morning Moments tab.